You can't look and say gap years are becoming more popular, therefore to get into medical school you should do a gap year. It's that sort of logic that just blows my mind and runs rampant on SDN and Reddit and everything else. So when you hear, I want to challenge all of you, when you hear that crap, challenge it. Don't accept it. Talk about, a lot of students don't really understand why residency matters. Why does it matter to the Texas Health Education Service and TMDSAS and the medical schools and the state of Texas overall that only 10% of students can be from out of state?
Well, that's the reason why Texas tuition is so cheap, is because the state legislature actually provides for the tuition. And so they are able to subsidize the overall tuition levels. So that brings it way down.
Yeah.
And so it's Texas taxpayer money going into that.
Okay.
And so that's where the requirement for Texas residency comes in.
That was something new that TMDS added to the application for this 2019 cycle, 2020 cycle. Was that, do you consider yourself a non-traditional kind of question? Why did you add that?
It's twofold. The first one, we wanted to make sure that the schools put their money where their mouth was.
Okay.
We hear from the schools all the time how important it is for a non-traditional student to apply and how desired non-traditional students were.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yep.
But there was no data to back it up.
Okay.
And so we had...
So not necessarily that you weren't seeing that, you just didn't have any data to support it.
There was nothing to support that.
Yep.
And so we had a proxy of using age to determine whether someone was non-traditional prior to that. But we thought it would be more beneficial for a student to identify themselves as non-traditional.
Yeah.
Because each journey is different. And so with that question, are you non-traditional, we also have a follow-up of explain why you decided to label yourself as non-traditional.
Yeah.
And that's given us some really great insights into a lot of students that we might not have considered, maybe they're not using the traditional definition of non-traditional.
Yeah.
But,
my assumption is a lot of students are saying, I'm non-traditional because I took a gap year.
And you know what? What they did in that gap year is important.
Correct.
And there are spots in the application to discuss that.
Yeah.
But it allows an admissions committee member to say, oh, okay, I better pay attention to their essay where they talk about this, or pay attention to that activity that they're discussing on here.
Yeah.
And so I think that's definitely a part of the application that helps non-traditional students specifically.
The optional essay for TMDSAS, I get lots of questions, like what should I be putting there?
Yeah.
Is it truly optional? Do you have data like what percentage of students actually don't fill it out?
I don't have it on hand.
I'm sure you could pull it.
But it'd be very interesting to
It'd be
take a look at.
very interesting.
The optional essay is optional. Asterisk.
Yeah, asterisk. Yeah.
I'm going to say that it is not optional.
Correct.
Because it's an opportunity for students to talk about anything in the application that wasn't already asked, to expand on a different section. For example, with activities, you only have 150 characters to talk about an activity.
Yeah.
And if you want to make it a meaningful activity, you get, X amount of additional characters. Maybe that's not enough to really say, this is why I wanted to become a doctor.
Yep.
And maybe it's not the main reason to be in one of the other sections, but that optional essay gives you that opportunity.
Yeah. My biggest message lately has been, and I think since I've started, but I've started to kind of hone in on it and give it more context, is the student's story matters so much. And that optional essay is just another opportunity to further flush out their story. And so, as you said, I don't think anything optional throughout the whole medical school application process, whether it's a COMIS, AMCAS, or TMDSAS, is truly optional.
Or even like interview days,
Correct.
Have optional activities.
Yeah,
Go
do
to
them.
those optional
Yeah,
activities.
do them.
Yeah.
What have you heard from medical schools as to kind of what they're hoping to see in an application. Obviously, stats aside, right? Yeah. They have to be good enough to get through the door. But in an application itself, what story are they looking for?
They're really, I don't know if subscribed is the right word, but something that's coming to mind, subscribe to the core competencies that are defined by the AMC.
Yep.
And seeing those throughout the application. And for the schools that have invited me to come see what their admissions committees are working through, it's very clear that the core competencies are important to them, but also the mission that the schools are promoting and the value statements that they have.
Yep.
And those value statements I really want to include because a lot of the schools in Texas will include values. For example, the Texas A&M system has established values that they've had for 100+ years.
Yeah.
And those values are important for them as employees of the Texas A&M system and are important for students of the Texas A&M system and as future alumni representing that. And so those are very important for those admissions committees to promote. So ultimately it comes down to tell your story in a way that really connects with an admissions committee member looking for X, Y, and Z that promotes their mission statement. Because ultimately you are promoting yourself to become an ambassador for that school. And once you're in, you're no longer just Ryan Gray. You're Ryan Gray, student from blah, 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 or doctor who attended this medical school.
Yeah. So Texas medical schools, the application to medical school, right, looking at from the outside, the very beginning part of it, similar to everywhere else, just it's a separate application service. On the back end, though, you have a match process.
Yeah.
Why? First, let's explain the match. In as briefly as possible,
Sure.
what is the med school match?
It's very similar to the national residency match. And so what the match does is it pairs students to schools on a one-to-one basis in that applicants go in and fill out which schools they prefer to match to, and then the schools will create a list of who they prefer to be added to their school.
Yeah. And
so the algorithm will pair students until the max number of spots are filled, and the schools will each set those, and then that essentially gives applicants a match. Now,
so the schools will set how many they want to match in the
programming behind the scenes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is outside of the pre-match. The pre-match is one-on-one, what people would consider a normal way that a school accepts a student.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So what the pre-match says is, hey, we're going to rank you high enough where if you rank us high enough, you'll match to us. There's like a sneak.
So it's still a little bit of a match there.
It still
potentially. It's not a direct.
It really empowers the applicant to say, well, I really want to match here, so I'm going to put them as one, and I know I'm getting in.
Okay.
Or I have a pre-match offer here. Maybe I might be able to shop around a little bit still to these other schools and have that as my backup.
Does the school see that student has ranked them as number 2 or number 1?
Schools do not see the student rankings.
So they just have their potential list of students. They don't know. Do they do they push a button and it goes, like this student hasn't ranked you?
It does not.
Yeah.
Every student that gets interviewed has to rank each of the schools that they interviewed at.
Correct. But what if a school likes a student, but the student didn't like the school? The school accepts that student, but they're lower down on the list than where they already have a match.
If that student ranked at a school higher, then the student just falls off of the list for that school.
So they will fall off the list. Okay. So that student's not available. Okay.
And also, a student can withdraw their application from a school that, maybe they went to go interview and said, oh, geez, this is not where I want to go. They can withdraw their application. And even if they get a pre-match offer, they can reject the pre-match offer if they decide to go somewhere else.
TMDSAS, Texas Health Education Service. How can students get more information? How can they learn more about it? If they're at a school maybe that doesn't have an advisor, maybe they're a high school student trying to figure this stuff out, what should they be doing?
Definitely visit the websites. The TMDSAS website is currently undergoing a massive refresh, and we are making all of the information about the application much more palatable. it's so dry. But we really make a strong effort to make sure that applicants get exactly what they need to know, including all the nuances of the application and figuring all that out. So TMDSAS.com is the website to go to. And also the Texas Health Education Service, we're focused on making the goal to becoming a doctor, dentist, or a veterinarian, a clear pathway for students all the way from high school through the application. And we're hoping to expand as well into those careers. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be a full gamut of everything they need to do to prepare and come back and engage with other professional organizations and get the resources that you need. So TXHES is the website for that. Obviously, we're continuing with the Apply Magazine. The podcast is being rebranded from the TMDSAS podcast to Inside Health Education. Mm-hmm. And that's going to allow us to branch out beyond TMDSAS, maybe talk to other healthcare professionals, mm-hmm. Other professional schools, and really explore more of the academic and non-academic aspects of preparation, not unlike what you already do, but we want to focus it on Texas.
Headed off to Texas A&M. We're in College Station, Texas. Beautiful Saturday for AMSA Premed Fest. Premed Fest has historically been in Tampa at USF, but the American Medical Student Association decided to bring it to Texas this year. And so hopefully, everything being bigger in Texas, hopefully it's a nice, big, exciting, fun conference for all the students. I know I'm giving 2 talks today. We'll have a table presenting. We have a meetup tonight. So hopefully, if you're watching this, hopefully I met you, said hi. Nowadays, you guys have lots of information. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. There's a lot of bad information out there. And hopefully in our session today, I can dispel a lot of myths, I can answer a lot of questions, we'll do tons of Q&A. We'll get you going so that when you are interviewing, you are there to really show off who you are as a person, why you want to be a doctor, and hopefully that interview will turn into an acceptance. So the goal, at its core, the goal of the medical school interview is to do dance, right? When you dance, one person leads, one person follows. In the interview, the interviewer is leading and you're following. It's a conversation. They're asking a question, you're answering it. And so when the leader asks why you want to be a doctor, the goal isn't to say, because I'm the most compassionate person ever. I know that I have the empathy and I love science so much that my eyes bleed because I just love it so much. I could stay up all night studying OChem. And I know that I'm going to be an amazing medical student because I love science. Students do that. A lot of students will focus so much on grades and MCAT scores that they don't really understand why they're pursuing this path. And that comes across in a personal statement, and it comes across in an interview. And if the interviewer isn't convinced that you really understand what being a doctor is like, number one, you probably won't be there for the interview to begin with. And number two, if you are there for the interviewer, you probably won't be accepted. If you haven't heard, being a physician is kind of hard. Going to medical school is very hard. Being a resident, it's hard. So they want to make sure that you understand what those sacrifices are. The goal, from their point of view, is to see if you're going to be someone who is going to be a good member of the class. Remember that they are not accepting one person. They are accepting a whole community of students. And they have kind of their idea. They meet every year as an admissions committee and say, okay, who do we want our class to look like? Do we want it to be kind of the jockey class this year? Do we want it to be the science nerds? Do we want it to be the whatever, right? What's the makeup of the class that we kind of want to see? And that's where, when you kind of go outside of the box a little bit and stop trying to sell yourself as to how compassionate and empathetic and hardworking and dedicated and motivated and all of the cliche things, you start to show who you are. You start to show personality. Right? It's important. And so as you are picking apart your responses for your interview, and this goes for your essays as well, for your application, pick apart sentence by sentence, thought by thought, kind of bullet point by bullet point when you're frameworking kind of your answers and thinking about the answers to your interview. And think about, is this a generic statement? I'm dedicated, I'm hardworking, I'm empathetic. Generic statement? Or is it your story? So when you're looking at your answers, you need to tell your story. So how do you do that? Well, you talk to a lot of people, talk to family and friends to say, hey, Mom, Dad, when did I first start talking about wanting to be a doctor? Hey, Mom, Dad, when I came home from my first shadowing experience when I was in high school, my first clinical experience, or I was a candy striper in high school, whatever it was. When I first came home from that experience, what was that like? So if you're not right now journaling, I highly recommend you start journaling. After every clinical experience, after every shadowing experience, after every volunteer experience, after all of your research experiences, every day you should be journaling.
One small tendency I have, which is kind of hard to notice, is like I'll start off kind of like deeper voice.
Yeah.
And as I get more comfortable, it becomes more like normal.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, how would you work on that? 'Cause it's kind of like
Start off more normal?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a big issue.
Okay.
I mean, the interviewers understand stress, right? They understand that students are going to be stressed and stressed out during the interview process, and that's going to show up in 1,001 different ways. And for you, if it's the pitch or tone of your voice changes over time, it's fine. It's nothing to worry about.
Sometimes whenever like I'm like first meeting people or something, I'll be like, just to kind of like separate myself in like a playful manner, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm the just in a playful manner. Would you recommend that during
No.
med school? No, probably
No.
not. I didn't think so,
No.
but I just wanted to see, something to separate.
Yeah, humor on your interview day, usually I try to avoid, because you just don't know how it's going to land. You think you're the funniest dude around, and you're just playing around, and they're like, who's this arrogant jerk?
Yeah.
Right, so you just
Try to stay
avoid
away
it.
from it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yes, ask questions. In this book, there's a list of questions to potentially ask. I've updated it since then. So everyone says ask questions about them. Everyone likes to talk about themselves, right? Ask questions about them. I don't like that. Like, why did you come to this school? It doesn't really matter. It's not a reason why you should come to this school. And then don't ask super specific questions like, oh, I heard that the curriculum is changing. What's the curriculum changing to? Because they might not know the answer. So you don't want to ask questions that are not going to help you understand the school more, and questions that the interviewer may not have answers to. Okay, so one of my favorite questions is to ask, what's something that you love about the school that not many people know about? Opinion-based, anyone can answer it, and it kind of is asking about themselves, right? It's because it's asking about their opinion. So think through opinion-based questions like that anyone can answer and can give you more information about the school. So studying abroad, why do you want to study abroad?
I was going to say, I'm just really interested in the culture of the country.
Okay, great, go do it.
Do it?
And just make it work.
Okay.
Yeah, just figure it out. Obviously, I would talk to your advisor. Do you have a pre-health office at Austin? So talk to your advisor, find out what a timeline looks like as far as what year are you?
Sophomore.
So sophomore, right? So MCAT's coming soon, next year. So just look at that timeline of if I leave for this semester, am I going to have to come back and really rush studying for the MCAT? Should I take a gap year and travel? Maybe it's not a true study abroad. Maybe I just take a gap year and go study and just go abroad. There are a bunch of ways to skin the cat. Just make sure you're not going away at a critical moment that's going to screw up your whole timeline that you want for yourself. And there's no right timeline, right? You can do whatever you want. So the core of research on an application is to see how inquisitive you are as a human being. So if you have other experiences that line up with that inquisitiveness, if that's a word, then you're fine.
So it's like showing med schools you have that quality, the way of thinking.
Correct. Not necessarily a way of thinking, but just the curiosity behind it, right? Because that's the core of research, is really questioning everything we do. And so if you have that in other places, great. Will there be a medical school out there that's like, oh, Joy doesn't have any research, we don't want her? Sure, but that's okay.
All right.
So there's a difference between cliché and common, right? Cliché is, I want to be a doctor because I like science and I want to help people. That's cliché because there's no meaning behind it. There's no you behind it. If you say, I was exposed to medicine because my mom was a doctor, my dad was a doctor, grandma got sick, whatever, and then you lay out your story, the path behind that, that's common, but it's not cliché. And so where students go wrong is they think common is cliché, and it's not. And so they go like completely AWOL with their personal statement and do something completely weird,
Yeah, like off book entirely.
off book, and then it doesn't land. And so don't worry about common, just make sure you're telling your story. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Since shadowing is a little bit difficult to get sometimes, do you think that medical schools really put a priority on shadowing? Still? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's important. You need to know what being a doctor is like. And shadowing isn't the end all be all. Clinical experience is really, really important. It sounds like you are getting some clinical experience. I would have to see how you kind of wrote about it, what you talked about. Obviously, the TMDSAS application only gives you 150 characters to talk about anything. So if you labeled it as a most meaningful,
Right.
what did that look like? So there's just so many pieces in an application.
Right.
And just some of the things that you've told me, like I would worry that your application just didn't tell your story properly. To where your MCAT doesn't really scare me, it's the story that potentially, how it all fits together is potentially where there may be a weakness. That's what the whole application is how do the experiences, how do you reflect upon them, and how it kind of made you who you are. They're not looking for, oh, you got a great clinical experience or research experience during an internship. That's awesome, that's exactly what we were looking for. That's not what they're doing. If I look at students who apply to medical school and I go, oh, look, everyone who applies to medical school eats 3 meals a day. You should eat 3 meals a day because that's how you get into medical school, right? It doesn't mean anything. Students are taking more gap years because people like this dude are saying you should take a gap year because students are taking gap years. What's the reason they're taking gap years? We don't know. Is the gap year the reason they're getting into medical school? We don't know. If you're going to study now, go on your study abroad, you have to assume that you're not going to study at all during your study abroad. I'm going to make that assumption.
Okay.
You're going to have a lot of fun, which you should enjoy to the best of your ability. Everything that you're going to study now is out the window. And so you're basically going to come back and start studying. And so if you come back in May, you have all of May to study, or whenever you get back, however much of June to potentially take the test. And so is that enough to retake the test and get a higher score than what you have now? Or do you play the more conservative route, which is what I usually do, and just go enjoy study abroad without worrying about anything, about coming back and needing to apply and needing to take a test, and just go do your study abroad, come back, start a shadowing job somewhere, do whatever you want, and then reapply in 2021. So for something like wrestling, when you're applying to medical school, you don't have to go, being a wrestler is going to make me a better doctor because. You can just say, I was a wrestler because I want to be a wrestler. And that's all. You don't have to connect it to medicine in that way. That's okay. right? Again, looking at big picture who that student is, having those other experiences outside of just medicine makes you more well-rounded, makes you a better member of the community as we're building our class. All of that is good. So let me clarify, right? Medical schools, a lot of them will use a rubric and do some sort of mathematical calculation with your MCAT and GPA score. Okay? But that doesn't tell me anything about anything. Just tells me how that's one piece of information for how they're evaluating every application. And then they'll have someone review the application and go, okay, this person is disadvantaged, let me read the essay. Okay, on a scale of however many points we allot for disadvantaged essays, I'm gonna give them X number of points. And then, okay, let me look at their personal statement. Based on how many points we allot for personal statements, I like their personal statement, I'm gonna give them this many points. Then, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. It's a whole application, not a Lizzie-M score. That's my issue with Lizzie-M. Is students looking at Lizzie-M going, oh, okay, this makes me competitive, this doesn't make me competitive. So another conference in the books, this time in Texas for AMSA Premed Fest at College Station. Had an amazing time meeting up with some internet friends in real life with Mama Dr. Jones, Dr. Danielle Jones, and Dr. Natalie Crawford. Amazing time meeting them. They are amazing people. If you don't follow them, go do that. I also got to hear the amazing things that TMDSAS is working on. It seems like it's a weird system, but because it is a closed system with Texas, they're able to do a lot of things, give you, the students, some amazing stats and some other information that other application services aren't. And of course, AMSA Premed Fest at Texas A&M. While I'm a Gator, and so I got the heebie-jeebies being at Texas A&M, I had a blast meeting with students, talking with them, busting myths and all kinds of amazing things. If you're not going to conferences, meeting with other students, collaborating with them, you should be. You get the opportunity to talk to other students, hear what they're hearing from their advisors on their campuses, hear what they're hearing from other students on their campus, and really compare notes and hopefully squash some myths. I was able to do that at a meetup that we had last night. Students were asking questions, and I'm like, where are you hearing that? It's just not true. So please, please, please go out, get outside of your bubble and hear some other opinions about the pre-med process, about what it takes to get into medical school. And when you go to these conferences, you get to meet directly with medical schools and hear directly from them. So amazing trip, amazing time. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you next time.